The Blackmagic camera app has pretty much replaced Filmic Pro as the go-to app for manual control on your smartphone. And it's now available on iPhone and some Android devices. And I've tried it on my Samsung S24 Ultra and my Xiaomi 14 Ultra, and it works fine on both. There's not as many features on the Android version, but they are updating it all the time. So this video is divided into 3 sections. First, I'm going to go through some basic settings on the Blackmagic app itself, including how to record directly onto an SSD drive. Then I'm going to talk about the new Genius Vision rig from Freewell. And then finally, I'm going to go through how to make your video sequences more engaging. Okay, so let's get started. Now, if you've got an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max and you want to shoot the absolute highest quality video, go into settings and then codec, and then choose Apple ProRes 422HQ. The files are going to be huge, but they will contain the most image information possible. And for color grading, ProRes 422HQ will give you the best results. But if you do choose this codec, I recommend that you record to an external SSD because it's going to save your phone's internal storage, and it's also going to speed up your workflow. I'm going to show you how to do that later in this video. On a Samsung S24 Ultra, your only options here are H.265 or H.264. Personally, I always shoot H.265 because it's the more efficient version. So that way you get the best quality video, but in smaller file sizes. Now back on the iPhone, you want to set the resolution to 4K. On the Samsung, your best quality here is 8K UHD. So I'm not sure why they called it Ultra UHD, because the U in UHD actually stands for Ultra. It's just 8K Ultra High Definition. And now let's choose our color space. For color grading, the best setting on the iPhone is Apple Log HDR. This is going to give you a washed out video, which is like a kind of neutral starting point, and it gives you more options later. And really, Apple Log is probably the best log format on a smartphone at the moment. So on the Samsung, our best quality color space is BT 2020 HLG 10, which is going to give us 10-bit color depth. And the setting will also give you a hybrid log gamma or HLG, so you might want to then convert it to a Rec 709 when you are editing. But you should still get the advantage of 10-bit color. Okay, tap the camera button to go back to the main screen. And you can see that we have our resolution setting in the top right corner of the preview window. And now we want to set our frame rate. And to do that, tap where it says FPS. So this opens up a slider on the right of the preview window. On the iPhone 15 Pro, we have a range of frame rates, and they go from 23.98 up to 60. At 23.98, 29.97 and 59.94 are what's known as NTSC frame rates, and they correspond to these whole number frame rates like 24, 30 and 60 frames per second. Personally, I've never had a need to shoot NTSC, so I just stick with these normal frame rates. On the Samsung, because we're shooting 8K, our only choice here is 24, 25 and 30 frames per second. And if we shoot 4K, we can access the 48, 50 as well as 60 frames per second settings. So there's no higher quality frame rates because the rate that you choose depends on what you want the shot to look like and what you want to use it for. So if you want your video to look more like film, then choose the 24 frames per second. Otherwise, just choose 30 frames per second. When you're using 24 frames per second, it does become a little bit more important to have a slower shutter speed to get a smoother looking video. The main reason to choose 60 frames per second is for slow motion. You just shoot 60 frames per second, and then when you're editing, you can slow it down to 30 or 24 frames per second, depending on the look you're going for. Now, if you want to shoot your shots to look more professional, you probably want to use manual exposure settings. And with auto exposure, when you move the camera, you can see the exposure changing, and this can look a little bit ugly and messy. So at the moment, the exposure is set to auto, and you can see that we have this letter A next to the shutter and ISO settings. In a smartphone, these are the 2 settings that we have to control exposure. If you want to lock exposure so it doesn't adjust during a shot, tap the exposure button on the right above the record button. So this opens an exposure compensation slider. Now if you tap where it says auto, that switches the app into manual exposure mode. So now when you move the camera, the exposure won't adjust. To set exposure, you need to adjust the shutter speed in ISO manually. So tap the ISO setting to open up a slider. And for some reason, on the iPhone, the ISO is next to white balance, but on the Samsung, it's next to shutter speed. Now you've got two scales here. The ISO settings on the right are in stops from ISO 100 to 3200 ISO. Now you just tap them to choose that setting. But if we use the slider, we can fine-tune the ISO setting and we can go higher and lower as well. And personally, I always set ISO to the lowest possible setting. So that would be 55 for the iPhone 15 Pro and 20 for the Samsung S24 Ultra. But that said, there is a theory that setting your iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max ISO to about 1000 is going to give you the most dynamic range. But the problem is that when you do that, you're going to boost the exposure and you're going to have a very fast shutter speed. Then you're going to need to implement ND filters even if the light isn't that bright. Tap shutter speed to open the slider on the right. For the smoothest looking video, you need to get your shutter speed down to around double the frame rate, because a slow shutter speed adds motion blur to the image, which then makes motion look smoother. But you know, I'm not really someone who gets obsessed about the 180-degree shutter rule. If your frame rate is 24 frames per second and your shutter speed is, you know, something like 1/100th of a second, in most cases, you're going to get enough motion blur. But you can experiment with this yourself. Just increase the speed of the shutter and see how fast it needs to be before you find it kind of harsh looking on your eye. Now the problem occurs when you're shooting in daylight. So even with ISO shut as low as possible, you're probably going to find that setting a slow shutter speed is going to cause your image to be heavily overexposed. And the only real solution to this is to use ND filters. To record video directly to an external drive using the Blackmagic app, first you need to connect a portable SSD. And you're going to need one with read-write speeds that are fast enough for recording 60 frames per second 4K video. So for example, a Samsung T7 or a T9. And here I'm actually just using a Crucial X9 4TB drive. Open the app, go to settings and then media. There's actually two media tabs, so don't get confused. You actually want the one on the left under settings. The button on the right is for your gallery. Tap Save Clips to and then Files. Now you want to navigate to the SSD. So tap on my phone and then Browse. And now you should see your external SSD below iCloud Drive and on my phone. So just tap it to open it. Now if you want to create a new folder to save your videos in, tap the button with the three dots and then tap New Folder. A new folder is created and you can name it. And when you finish naming it, it opens automatically. And now tap Open in the top right and the Blackmagic app is now set to record video onto the external SSD. So if I go back to the main screen of the Blackmagic app, you can see that in the middle at the bottom of the screen, it now shows us the attached SSD drive. Now just tap record and the Blackmagic app is going to start recording video direct to your SSD. Doing this on a Samsung S24 Ultra is pretty much the same. Open the Blackmagic app and go to settings and then media, tap save to and then files. Open the menu in the top left corner and here choose your drive. If you want to create a folder to store files in, tap the folder with the plus sign. Now when I record video, it's going to be saved into this folder. With an Android, you need to dismount your drive when you want to remove it, like you do with a computer. Tap the menu again, then tap the eject button next to the drive. If we want to edit the video that we just recorded on our laptop or our computer, all we've got to do is just take the SSD from the phone and plug it into the computer. And really, there's no need to spend any time at all transferring files via AirDrop or Wi-Fi or whatever. In fact, you can just leave the drive plugged in and then import the video files directly into your editing system. So where does that take us? We now have our smartphones set to record high quality video onto an external SSD. But in daylight, we either have our video that's overexposed or we have no motion blur. As well, we have this SSD dangling precariously from our smartphone. Now, how long before it falls off, or maybe it just gets caught on something and then it damages the drive and maybe even the USB-C port on your phone? So what are we going to do? Well, here's one solution.
Freewell has made video creation easier with their new Genius Vision Kit. So they've sent me one for the iPhone 15 Pro and another one for the Samsung S24 Ultra. And like with their multi-purpose selfie stick, there is a bit of a Swiss Army knife vibe about the Genius Vision Kit. It's a versatile kit for adding grips. There's cold shoe mounts, there's a Bluetooth shutter button, you can mount lenses and you can mount filters, and as well as an extra purchase, you can add this SSD mount. So this kit is really very customizable, so you can switch things around depending on what you want to do. I'm just going to go through it here. Now we open the two catches and place your phone in the metal cage. And this is all rubber on the inside, so your phone is going to be well protected. Close the catches to fix the cage in place. There's 3 cold shoe mounts, 2 on the top and 1 on the side. There's also 1/4-inch tripod ports, so you can mount it to a tripod. There are rubber buttons, so you can access the buttons on your phone. The kit comes with these 2 metal handles, which just easily clip on at various points. It's very quick. Press in, clip on. There's the standard side mount option. As well, the handle rotates so that you can have them at any angle. You can also clip a handle onto the top or bottom of the cage, and this is good for low shots. There's a magnetic Bluetooth shutter button which you can place on either handle, and it also rotates around on the top here. On the top of each handle is another cold shoe mount, so you can really set this system up in so many different ways. The handles also pack little surprises. Unscrew one and now it's a mini tripod, which you can then attach to the bottom of the cage. The second handle extends, so you can use that as a kind of selfie stick type of thing. But as well, you can unscrew the extendable handle and then attach it to the mini tripod handle, attach it to the cage, extend, and now you've pretty much tripled the size of your mini tripod. But we're not done yet, because this cage allows Freewell's Sherpa magnetic filters to be mounted, and you can also mount Freewell's lenses using the plate. And that's not all, because this plate can be switched out for alternative plates, which you can get as an extra purchase. The T-Bayonet lens mount allows you to attach any Moment T-Series lens to the Freewell Genius rig while still being compatible with the Freewell magnetic filters. And then there's the 17mm lens mount, which allows you to attach any 17mm lens, or even this little filter mount, which is a 17mm to 37mm step-up ring, so you could add a little 37mm filter on top of that.
One problem with a lot of online tutorials is that they talk about video creation from the point of view of a single shot. But engaging videos are almost never made up of a single shot. So of course we know that they're made up of many shots that work together to create a scene or a sequence. But the big question is, how do we get them all to work together? You know, a bit like players in a football team. So that's obviously a really big question. And in my new course on Patreon, I've broken this big question down into 7 smaller questions that you can ask yourself when you're creating a video sequence. So the course is 7 lessons, and in each lesson, we're going to cover one of these questions. So if you want to take your video creation skills beyond just camera settings, then this is the course for you. But here I'm just going to give you a little taste so you can get an idea of what this course is all about, but also these tips are going to be useful to you anyway. Tip 1 is about preparation. So that our sequence isn't kind of soulless and empty, we need to work out the emotions that we want to convey before we actually start shooting the sequence. And a good way to do this is to create a mood board.
And a mood board is basically a collection of images which you feel reflect the mood of your proposed video. And mood boards have been used for decades in all levels of professional video creation, you know, from $1 million projects to small solo filmmaker projects. But in the old days, mood boards were created by cutting out photos from magazines, taking and printing photos and sketches. But now, of course, it's much easier with the internet and various software that we can use to quickly collect and display images. So for example, you can use Google Docs and then you can just drag the images onto the document.
So again, this is just something to do when you're ready to take the step to the next level. And actually, they're a lot of fun to do anyway. And one thing that people do before they take their video creation seriously, quite often they don't think about the subject of the video. They just go and film everything.
For example, as tourists visiting a beauty spot, we will just pull out our smartphone, hit record, and then shoot a simple pan shot. Or even worse, we move the camera randomly around the scene like a sort of wandering eye. And these kinds of shots are very wishy-washy and unfocused. Because what are we telling our audience with these shots? What we're telling them is that they should also feel unfocused and that their mind should also wander. And they will start wondering what other videos they could watch instead, and then click, off they go.
So to stop your audience just kind of wandering off, before you frame a shot, you need to ask yourself what or who is your subject. Now my third tip is that every shot within a sequence should reveal something. Now if you've watched a number of video creation tutorials on YouTube, you probably come across people talking about a thing called a reveal shot. And I've actually made a few of these videos myself. And usually this kind of shot involves the camera kind of popping out from behind something. For example, a tree trunk. And then you just reveal what's behind the tree trunk. Another type of reveal shot is like a rack focus, for example. So you change the focus from one subject to another subject, thereby revealing the second subject. And really there's infinite ways in which you can shoot some kind of reveal shot. But that's actually only one type of reveal.
Because the subject's expression also reveals something. It reveals how they're feeling at that moment. And going from a close-up to a wide shot also reveals something. It reveals more about the location. And you know, I could just go on and on and on talking about how a shot can reveal something. That just gives you a little idea of what I'm talking about here. Because the thing is, if a shot doesn't reveal anything, because it's already been shown before, then your sequence is going to end up being repetitive. If it's repetitive, it's going to be boring to watch.
So I've really just scratched the surface here. And if you do want to go deeper into these kind of things, then join us on Patreon. And really anyone can benefit from this course. It doesn't matter what type of videos you're making, if they're sort of family videos, vlogs, real estate, travel videos, or even short films. Any kind of video which contains a scene or a sequence within it, then using these methods, you'll be able to create something that's cohesive, it works together, and you won't have this kind of confusing message. Your audience will know exactly what you're trying to tell them.